As a conservative rabbi, do I continue not to do interfaith marriages? That is a very controversial question. Right now, that question is hotly debated in our community of rabbis, and I'm sure that we'll see some sort of change coming in the next generation. There's a large movement among young conservative colleagues to do certain kinds of interfaith marriages. Not blanket, not all of them, but there are a lot of guys who are saying there are certain circumstances under which it should be allowed. And right now it's up to every individual congregation and therefore every individual rabbi to decide what to do. My synagogue, we have a group called the Family Commission, which determines issues of membership and other things. It was the Family Commission 25 years ago, or 20 years ago, that made the determination that we would welcome gay, lesbian, Jews as full members of the shul and register the couples as full, ordinary, boring Jewish members of the shul and welcome their kids and issues like that. So our Family Commission has spent the last 3 years debating and arguing and exploring this issue, and we haven't finished yet. You all have to know that the denominations of American Judaism can be represented very well by a traffic light. The Orthodox say red light, the Reforms say green light, and the conservatives say yellow light, which means we're not sure, we're taking our time, we're thinking about it, but someone's going to run the light. The question for me, I would never, okay, just have one, and you can pass the rest down, because we're going to actually study this one. For me, I'm not interested in performing an interfaith marriage. That is, if one partner is Jewish and the other partner is Christian or Muslim and truly committed to their faith, I have a hard time with that because even though I have a degree in religion, I think that matrimony, first of all, I think that families deserve a certain consistency of values. I think children do that. Although I've helped many, many families who are interfaith try to figure things out. But in terms of the ceremony itself, it's not, I don't feel comfortable doing it. I think that the Christian partner has every right to ask that their symbols and rituals and holy values sacred values be represented in the matrimony, in a ceremony. And I want a Jewish partner to do the same. And I don't know how you combine them. I know that there are families that have done that and have lived that way, and I'll help anybody live Jewishly who wants. I'm interested in this couple. I'm interested in the couple where one partner may be born Jewish or converted to Judaism, and the other partner, while they may not be Jewish, has no other faith. And I've had lots and lots and lots of couples in my synagogue who are that way. Either has no other faith or has left the faith of their birth, and is interested in living a Jewish life, but for whatever reason, isn't ready to convert. Okay? And I have lots of families like that. And in that case, I want to support the creation of a Jewish family because I have every confidence that they're going to live a Jewish life. And I would like to be able to say something at that wedding. Now, whether I'm the actual officiant or whether I participate in it, these are kinds of things that have to be determined. But I think that conversion, first of all, the whole question of conversion to me is a little suspicious because nobody becomes Jewish overnight, even if you're born Jewish. It's a lifetime of choices and adopting certain forms of life and certain values and learning and growing. And I think we ought to give people from the outside the same opportunity. And it's a political category, basically. You're a citizen or an alien, right? But it doesn't work that way in religion. It's not yes or no. It's not a toggle switch. We should be giving people a long time. So I would be, personally, I haven't done this, so don't get me in trouble with my union, because my synagogue is not ready to adopt this, and I work for them, and I like them, and I like working for them. I appreciate the community, but I would like to have the opportunity to interview a couple. And if I feel like they are committed to having a Jewish home and raising Jewish children, whether or not one of the partners has yet converted to Judaism, I would like to be able to have a role in their wedding. And that we'll see if that comes to be. We'll see if that comes to be. That's my personal opinion. I know all of the arguments against it, and I deeply appreciate them. But I also know that if I say to a couple, listen, guys, I can't marry you, what they're going to do, if they're into a Jewish wedding, they're going to go next door. There's a beautiful Reform temple next door with a wonderful group of rabbis, and I'm delighted that they'll go there. And one of those rabbis will marry them, and then they'll join that temple because they felt welcome in that place. And then his parents are going to leave and go join there, and I'm going to lose several families in the process. And I just don't see the point of that. I don't see the utility of that. So, like everybody else, I'm struggling with this. But my idea, I'm going to go one more step because you asked such a simple question, and I've now talked for half an hour. Try this one on for size. Judaism isn't what you are, it's what you do. Judaism isn't a category of personal status. Judaism is a description of a lifestyle. If Judaism is what you do, not what you are, whether you went through a mikveh or not isn't as important to me as whether you light Shabbos candles. Right? When my kids were small, like my daughter started dating, So I said to her, look, whether you marry someone who's Jewish or not, marry someone who will light Shabbos candles with you. Because we had raised our kids to really cherish Shabbos. And I knew that if she found a partner who would light Shabbos candles with her, that would be the partner who would support the life that I want, whether or not that person is officially or Jewish or anything else. I want that person to light Shabbos candles with my daughter. So, and with my sons too, by the way. So I'm really more interested in what people do, and I would like to participate in families where there is an interest in adopting a Jewish way of living and a Jewish way of thinking. And that's where I am, but right now the conservative movement, as is so typical, is undecided. Thank you for a wonderful question. We're answering questions. For those who just came in, you missed a great lecture. It was truly brilliant. And now we're on to questions and answers. Can I ask a favor, a rabbi or someone? It's freezing up here, and I don't know why. It's really pretty outside. Can we just turn off the air conditioning and enjoy God's air? Yeah, I find if you just kick those things really hard. No, don't do that. Yes, please.
As you prepared for this Shabbat, there were so many different cross-currents.
Thank you for taking care of it.
As you prepared for this Shabbat, there were so many cross-currents in previous parshas, in this parsha, and in subsequent parshas. How did you end up coming to the central theme of this sermon?
It's really simple. I left the San Fernando Valley a week ago, driving south. And Waze took me 40 years in the desert through, I don't know, I never knew there were so many Shomer Shabbos people in Southern California, because when I got on the 405, there were 20 million Shomer Shabbos ahead of me, all trying to get down here to Orange County to make Shabbos. So I had a whole long time to listen, to listen to my heart and find some words to say. And I turned on the radio to listen to the news, and I heard a name of a former president, so I turned it off because I don't need any more tsaros in my life. And there was a long time to think about it. I'm sorry, go ahead. What was your question? How did I figure this out? I don't know. The Parsha talks to you, no? Doesn't it talk to you? You open the Torah, and the Torah talks to you. It says, this is what I want you to teach today. So I said, okay, all right, I hear you. I said, I hear you. It's like my wife, right? So I listened to the Torah, and the Torah said this is what she wanted me to talk about today. So that's what I talked about today. Plus I had, several days to think about it on the 405, right? I know why the Messiah hasn't come, because he's on the 405. It's exactly right. It's like, it's a hell of a free. All right. Any of us have a question? You've been dying. I'm here. Rabbi Spitz is here. Rabbi Greenwald is here. 3 rabbis, no waiting. Who else is here? Rabbi Mendelson is here. Rabbi Funberg is here. Rabbi Podwall is here. My God, there's enough rabbis here to you. A minion of Rabbonim Epis. See, this is Machaya here. You want a blessing? We'll put our hands on your head and... Yes, please.
How does your congregation motivate young families?
How do we motivate young families to join? Oh, God. You know, my synagogue is just perfect. I don't know if you knew this. Thousands of young families come every Shabbos to fill up the... I don't know. Everybody's struggling with the same problems. We do have some things that are fun. So we have a wonderful Tat Shabbat that we invest in. I understand your junior congregation is quite remarkable. We have a number of, we're a very big synagogue. We're actually a small African country is what we are. We have our own fire department. We have multiple minyanim on a Shabbos morning. In fact, the reason my wife is not here, she loves you, but she couldn't come because her minyan meets this morning. She leads a minyan at VBS called Neshama, which is actually much nicer than my minyan. So it's musical and joyful. It started out as a woman's minyan, and then they let a couple of guys in, so now it's just called Neshama. We do multiple minyanim. Among them are family minyanim and Tat Shabbat and kids minyan and teen minyan. And we do lots of different kinds of things like that. And we try really hard to build a community of folks. And there's no secret. Everybody thinks there's a secret. It's a marketing secret. It's not marketing, and it's no secret. You just try to create an environment which is open and welcoming and engaging. You try to offer music which is open and welcoming, engaging. You try to explain to folks what this is about, and then one by one you build a community. There's no terrible secret to this, and families will come and go as their schedules allow, right? Because God wanted to test the Jewish people, so God gave us soccer. That's a test. It's like the Al-Qaeda, let's see if you'll kill your kids. This is what happens. I mean, this is very hard it's very, very hard, and I don't think there's a secret. And the only secret is to try and do everything you know how to do to make a community accessible and welcoming, and to create a religious life which is inspiring and engaging. And then you pray that it works. That's all I can tell you. I don't have any simple secret for that. Yeah, please. No, I call it soccer minyan, actually. So what happened was, all the kids were going to play soccer. There's a big park a few minutes from the shul, and they all play soccer on Shabbos morning. So I asked one of the guys who I knew was a coach, what time is the first match? And he said 9:20. And I said, well, tell you what, suppose we had a minyan at 8:30, and I served breakfast, and then you could leave by 9:10 and make it to the field for the 9:20 game. And he said, great. So we had soccer minyan for several years. I put out a spread of bagels and orange juice and coffee and cakes and stuff. The kids came in their uniforms, their little outfits. We had to put stuff on the floor because they got like spiky shoes, And the coaches all came, and they stashed their equipment in a corner, and they had a few minutes of breakfast and then a few minutes of davening and a little Dvar Torah. And then, anybody remember the movie The Newt Rockney Story with Ronald Reagan? Remember? So there's a prayer there. It's the prayer that the Notre Dame football team offers before. And I had so much fun leading that prayer. Everybody put your hands in the middle. Oh Lord, let us play hard. Give us the strength to win, to represent you on the field. Now, boys, go out and kill, kill, kill. In the name of Christ, amen. I didn't quite do that, but I could do it pretty well. So no, I did a little prayer about let's play hard, let's make friends, let's keep the rules, let's do it right, and let's be proud of whatever happens on the field. Now go, kill the sucker. No, go out and win. And it was and it worked for several years. That was that generation, and then we did other things. So I'm always open to something. I'm always open to try to find ways to engage folks in Jewish life. That's my job. That's what I try to do. And if I can find a quirky way to do it, right? This year we're going to go do Hanukkah in the mall. Chabad can do that. Why can't I? I'm more, and so we're going to do Hanukkah in the mall. We're going to take a little trio of musicians, and we got permission from the people who own the world to do Hanukkah in the mall, and we'll do Hanukkah. It turns out that in December there's probably more Jews in the mall than in shul. Just a hunch. I don't know. Somebody told me I should do Costco minyan. that on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, there's more Jews in Costco than there are in synagogue. So I had this idea of doing Costco. I mean, salvation, only $120. I just had this idea. Well, yeah, with free samples. That's exactly right. Here, have a verse of Torah. So I don't know. I'm thinking you gotta find something. I mean, there's no secret to this though. And the thing that I have a hard time is everyone thinks there's some kind of marketing thing. It's not marketing. You're talking about people's lives and values. And that takes place very slowly. And you're talking about a sort of countercultural idea. Prayer is countercultural. It's very different than the American ideal of happiness. And Shabbos is a very countercultural idea. I happen to think it's the most beautiful thing we ever created, but it takes some convincing to get people to see that it's not a deprivation. I'm not taking something away from you. I'm going to give you something that's sacred. That's what we have to work on. All right, another question, and then I'm going to teach a little bit. Just a joke, I didn't give the lecture yet, so you didn't miss any. Anyone else have a question they've been dying to ask a rabbi? This is your last chance. Going once, going twice. All right, you ready? I'm 17 years old and a freshman at UC Santa Cruz. I had very long hair and very strange ideas. It was the early days of UC Santa Cruz. So if you know that campus, it was the campus built by the regents in a moment of madness. And all of these renegade professors from Berkeley and UCLA went there. I lived in the dormitory, and there was a phone at the end of the hallway. And my mother would call every Friday afternoon just to wish me good Shabbos, and I'd chat with Mom. So one Friday afternoon in November, I get a call, and Mom says, the rabbi would like you to lead a service for kids coming home for Thanksgiving, a college-age kids service. What should I tell them? And I said, Mom, listen, I love the rabbi. He's a wonderful guy, but I have no interest whatsoever in leading a service in that shul. I mean, it's not for, I used to be a big leader in USY, so I used to do this all the time. So just tell the rabbi thank you, but no thank you. She said, okay, he's going to be disappointed. I said, all right. Next week, Mom calls and she says, the rabbi would like to see you when you come home. Oh, God. So I came home for Thanksgiving, and I went out and called the rabbi. He said, come over to the house. He had a study, and he's at his study, and he said, what's the problem? And I said, look, I love you, and I love the shul, and I love Torah, and I'm not abandoning my Jewish identity. But I got to tell you, I just don't find any inspiration in our services. And it's not me anymore. I've outgrown it. And it's just not what I want to be. And it's not where I want to be. And it doesn't speak to my life right now. I mean, this was during the Vietnam War. For those of you who are young, ask any person, any male my age, what was your number? Yeah, right. Were you really? Oh, my God. So that's all of it. They did conscription to a place. We were fighting a war in a faraway land that most of us didn't quite understand why we were there. This, of course, could never happen again in American history, but we did it, and there was conscription. You were forced to go, and it was done on a lottery based on your birthday. Well, I was living in that world, and somehow my religion had nothing to say about that, nor did it have anything to say about feminism, which was a very hot topic at the moment, nor did it have anything to say about any number of other issues that were important to me at 17 in college. And I said to the rabbi, I just don't see anything important here. And I don't think the synagogue reflects me anymore. And he didn't get mad. To his credit, he didn't get mad. He just said, do me a favor. Turn around. On the shelf behind you is that orange book. Take that orange book off the shelf. So I took this book off the shelf. He said, open it up to the first page. I did. He said, read out loud. So this is what I read. It is customary to blame secular science and anti-religious philosophy for the eclipse of religion in modern society. It would be more honest to blame religion for its own defeats. Religion declined not because it was refuted, but because it became irrelevant, dull, oppressive, and insipid. I said, hey, he's been to our shul, right? When faith is replaced by creed, worship by discipline, love by habit, when the crisis of today is ignored because the splendor of the past when faith becomes an heirloom rather than a living fountain, when religion speaks only in the name of authority rather than the voice of compassion, its message becomes meaningless. Religion is an answer to our ultimate questions. The moment we become oblivious to ultimate questions, religion becomes irrelevant and its crisis sets in. He said, that's Abraham Joshua Heschel, the most important Jewish thinker of our century. Take the book home and learn it. I never met Heschel in person. He died that year. But I've been reading him ever since, and he is indeed the most important religious philosopher of the 20th century. He died in 1972. His Yahrzeit, his 50th Yahrzeit, will be in a couple of weeks, in December. And so I've taken him up again to learn him again because I think that there's so much here. Look at that statement again. Religion wasn't refuted. Religion wasn't displaced by science or by secular philosophy or by skepticism. Religion declined because religion stopped doing what religion was supposed to do. Religion was supposed to help us address the most important questions of being human. But either we become oblivious to those questions, or religion doesn't offer answers that are compelling, we abandon religion. And that is a powerful indictment. Abraham Joshua Heschel, born in 1907 in Warsaw, he's the heir to two great Hasidic dynasties. 7 generations from the Baal Shem Tov on his father's side, 6 generations from the Maggid of Mezerich on his mother's side. As they say in Latin, that's Taka Yichis. He's really related to the greats. Even as a young child, he was a genius, seen as a genius. And he was already seen as someone who was going to come and save Polish Hasidism in the interwar years. But as he grew into teenagehood, he began to change. His father died at the age when he was 16, and his uncle, who was his mother's brother, took over his education. And they could see that Heschel was too big for this community. If you've ever read The Chosen, the character of Donnie Saunders, the Rebbe's son, who is sneaking to the public library, reading Freud and Marx, that's who Heschel was. That character, Chaim Potok, who wrote the book, was a student of Heschel's. And that's who Heschel was. He was a genius. He'd memorized the Talmud when he was a kid. They were already sending him questions, religious questions, when he was 15 years old. 16 years old, he's sneaking out of the yeshiva every night, going down to the end of the block where there's a coffee house. And he's reciting Yiddish poetry and sharing poetry. And his mother and his uncle realized, we got to get him out of the community. He needs more than this. So they sent him to Vilna, to high school. It's a Jewish high school, but it's a secular Jewish high school. And this young genius who has been ensconced in the community, the thick life of the mystical Hasidic community, he discovers European culture. Music and art and science and literature, learns languages very quickly. And it just sucks up everything that Western culture has to offer. When he graduates at age 19, he doesn't go back to the Stiebel. He doesn't go back to the community of Warsaw. He goes to Berlin. Because Berlin is the intellectual center of modernity in the 1920s and 1930s. And just to give you a sense of how representative he is, there is a story which I can't verify, but I think it's a good story anyway, which is that in the same apartment building live Heschel, the heir to the Hasidic line, Joseph Ber Soloveitchik, who was the great Lithuanian Talmud genius who will become the chief rabbi of Yeshiva University and all of modern Orthodoxy, and Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who will become the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe. They're all of the same biography. They come from the thick religious life of Eastern Europe, and they encounter modernity in Berlin. Well, he finishes his PhD in Berlin. In order to get it published, he has to go back to Warsaw. It gets published by the Polish Academy of Sciences. He's back in Warsaw. It's the summer of 1939. And he begs his parents, he begs his family to leave. He knows what's coming. He's been in Germany. He's seen what's happening. He begs them to leave, but they can't. Because the uncle is the Rebbe of a community and he can't leave his Hasidim. His mother, the sister of the uncle, won't leave her brother. Heschel's sisters won't leave their mother. So 6 weeks before the war, he gives them kisses and says goodbye. He goes to London where he has an uncle, and he never saw any of them again. They were all murdered in Auschwitz, including the whole community. He spends a year in London, and then the United States State Department, as anti-Semitic as Ken Burns told us it was, sets up a program to save European scholars, and so he gets rescued by Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati and brought there to teach. And there's a plaintive scene in his biography, the biography written by Dr. Kaplan, Professor Kaplan, where in the middle of his semester, his first or second year there, they come to him, the president of the college and three of his friends. He doesn't speak English yet. He's speaking Yiddish. And they tell him that the Joint Distribution Committee has confirmed that his family was killed in Auschwitz. And now he is alone, totally alone in the world. He is alone because his family is gone and there's nobody who knows his family. No one knows him. He is alone because he is a deeply religious man in a secular scientific culture that thinks of him as a lunatic. He is alone because there's fire burning in his soul and no one understands what he's talking about. In 1945, he moves to New York and teaches at the Jewish Theological Seminary, which was my alma mater. But even there, he's alone because the seminary is taken up by a certain kind of German scholar who's looking for a scientific understanding of classical texts, and there's no religion at JTS, and he is alone there too. Every year he chooses one or two students just to hang out with, but nobody else really understood what he was talking about, what he was doing. This terribly lonely man. I want you to understand two things about Heschel, well, three. Number one, what kind of Jew is he? Well, Heschel is a chassid. Now, you all think about Hasidim as these guys with the long black coats who put tefillin on you in the mall, right? That's not what Hasidism is. Hasidism begins in 1700 with the rise of the Baal Shem Tov. It was a revolt against orthodoxy. The previous century, the 1600s, 17th century, was one of the worst centuries in Jewish history. It begins with a massive pogrom organized by Cossacks and who organized the Polish serfs, the Polish peasantry, to revolt against their masters, and in the process to destroy Jewish communities. Thousands of Jews, hundreds of Jewish communities are destroyed by the Chmelnytsky massacres. And then comes Shabtai Tzvi, the great false messiah of early modernity, the late Middle Ages. And then the rabbis who run the community make a diagnosis, and sometimes even doctors do this. They diagnose it exactly opposite. They said the problem is too much religious enthusiasm. And so they create what we call the yeshiva culture, in which they say that only the most pious and learned among us can get close to God. The rest of you schleppers, all you can do is support a scholar, but you'll never get close to God. And there is a deep depression, a disillusionment, a dispirited despair that grips the Jewish community at the end of the 17th century, and a revolution arises. Those of you who were with me last night, this is one of the classic cases of discontinuity. A man named Israel ben Eliezer, who was not ordained a rabbi, he was just a storyteller and a healer, begins to teach a new philosophy. He takes a mystical idea, which was technical in its original form, and makes it popular. It's a simple phrase from the Zohar, the mystical Jewish text of Kabbalah. Leit atar panui minei. No place in the universe is free of God. God is everywhere. God is in all things. God is in all experiences. God is right next to you. What separates you from God is not metaphysical. It's not that God is far away and you need some virtuosity in order to get close to God. What separates you from God is psychological, your own sadness. Because sadness is a form of egoism. Sadness is a form of selfishness. When you're sad, you go, oy vey, me, vey is mir, woe is me, vey is mir, woe is me, and do I feel crappy, do I feel terrible, life sucks. Right? Everyone see Avenue Q, it starts with a song called It Sucks to Be Me. And the Hasidim said, stop that. You want to know God? Dance. You want to know God? Sing. You want to know God? Open your mind. God is right there. And the Hasidim said, yes, the scholar in the yeshiva, he's close to God. So is the child playing in the playground, close to God. So is the shoemaker who makes his shoes, repairs the shoes with a sense of kindness and service and kavanah. He's close to God. Yes, the synagogue is filled with God, but so is the forest. So is the mountains. So is the ocean. Anywhere you go, there is God. Open your mind to see that. And that's why you have joy. The Hasidic tradition said it's religious experience and not the forms of religion that matter. There's a great Hasidic story, right? The Hasid's talking to a Litvak. Litvak is a pedantic Jew like my ancestors. Litvak says to the Hasid, problem with you people is you don't observe the law. There is a law that governs prayer. Prayer is supposed to be a certain time in the morning. You don't do it then. Prayer is supposed to be a certain time at night. You ignore that. Hasid says, oh, my brother, you're right. Nebuch, you're right. Let me tell you what happens. I get up in the morning, ready to pray. I take my talis and my tefillin and my siddur, my prayer book, and I go to the window, and I open the window. And you know what happens? The morning floods into the room. The sky is light. There are birds. I see children on their way to school. I see grown-ups on their way to work. The light fills the world. The sun rises over the mountains. I am so taken with the wonder of the morning. I forget to pray until it's too late. Nebuch, in the evening, I'll pray on time. So the evening comes, I go to the window with my siddur. I open the window. You know what happens? The sky is dark. The stars are out. The moon, it shines. I see families gathered around their hearths together. I feel the peace and quiet, the quiet song of the night. And before I know it, Nebuch, it's too late to pray. Don't worry, I have a solution. Tomorrow, I'll close the window. And the Litvak says, God forbid. That's how you know it's a Hasidic story. Think about that story a minute. We have religious experience, and then we have the forms. Which is more important, asked the Hasidic tradition. Well, they're both important, but sometimes the form tends to crush the experience. And when form crushes experience, religion dies. And what Hasidism was devoted to was to reawakening the experience. To reawaken the experience. So Heschel in 1964, he publishes an essay in which he puts out his philosophical program. And he calls the essay Depth Theology. And I gave you a little bit of it here. The title, by the way, you have to pay attention to Heschel's language. The title, Depth Theology, is a play on the phrase depth psychology. Okay? My brother's a cognitive behavioral therapist. He worked his way through graduate school teaching classes for people who are afraid to take airplane flights. He could train you to be on an airplane in 3 hours. He gave you visualization exercises, relaxation exercises. He showed you how you can get through an airplane flight without being afraid. If you go to my brother, he can solve your problems in 3 hours. Or you can go to depth psychology, which is another word for classical psychoanalysis. When I was in New York, I encountered this. People I knew did this. You go to a therapist 5 days a week for an hour at $225 an hour. He buys a Mercedes-Benz, and you find out not how to solve your problem, but why you have a problem altogether. It's what's the origin of your problem. Depth theology does the same thing. Here's Heschel's question. Where is religion to be found? What sort of entity is it? What is its mode of being? One who is in search of art will find it as works of art preserved in art collections. One who's in search of literature will find it in books, preserved in libraries. But where is the place of religion? Do visible symbols as preserved in, temples, doctrines and dogmas in books contain the totality of religion? Here's the question. Somebody comes to you and says, I want to learn music. Where do you go? Where do you send them? Come on. You send them to a music class, music appreciation class. You get them online now, right? You send them to a concert where the conductor explains the piece. You send them to a conservatory where they can really study composition. Okay. Someone wants to learn art. Where do they go? Well, you go to a gallery and let someone give you a class on art appreciation or a gallery talk on a certain school of art. Or you get a book on art. Okay? You want literature. Same thing. You take a lit class. You listen to a lecture on literature. You meet an author who's written stuff, right? If I want to learn cooking, if I want to learn, knitting, you can go and find a class in that. If someone says, I want to learn religion, where do they go? Well, when I was in college, I took Religion 1. Anybody take that class? First, we read all the books. We read the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Bhagavad Gita, and the Quran, and the Upanishads, and the Confessions of Confucius, and the autobiography of Thomas Merton. Then we took a field trip. We went to the synagogue, and the mosque, and the ashram, and the meditation center, and the church, and the monastery. Then I met the practitioner. I met the rabbi, and I met the imam, and I met the guru, and I met the priest, and I met the minister. Then we witnessed the rites. We went to a church service on a Sunday, and we went to a Muslim service on a Friday, and we went to a Shabbos service on a Saturday, and we witnessed the Buddhist meditation. And then I took my test. What is the meaning of salvation in contemporary Protestantism? And what does jihad mean in Islam? And what is the role of the State of Israel in contemporary Judaism? And I got a B. Damn it. Do I know religion? I know the books. I know the basic beliefs. I witnessed the rites. I know the practitioner. Do I know religion? Well, do symbols as preserved in temples, doctrines and dogmas contained in books, contain the totality of religion? Let's look at the next paragraph. Religion has been reduced to institution, the place, symbol, the stuff, theology, the beliefs. Oh, by the way, let's get more personal about this. I went to Hebrew school. I learned which order you put the Hanukkah candles in the menorah and which order you light them. To this day, I can't remember. I have to go find a 5-year-old to do it for me. I know the list of kosher animals and the list of not kosher animals. We had European teachers in those days. And he would say to us, boys, the one who is saying the Shema the fastest is going to recess. The others stay here and clean the room. On your mark, get set, go. Shema Yisrael Echad. I learned my Haftorah from my bar mitzvah. Halo kivanei chushim atem li. Do you think I know what it means? Now I do. You think at 13 I had any idea what it meant? What the words mean? Who the prophet Amos was? Why he said this? What it has to do with the Torah reading? What it had to do with me? That wasn't the concern. The concern was get little Eddie up on the bima so his mama can be proud of him, which she was. And I got presents. I got one share of Disney. So I own the Matterhorn now. That was a long time ago. We do this to kids, right? We teach them all the forms. Something's missing, says Heschel. Religion has been reduced to institution symbol theology. Now the it refers to the reduction, and I will translate the next sentence. Don't get worried. Does not affect the pre-theological situation, the pre-symbolic depth of existence. Don't get nervous, I will translate. To redirect the trend, we must lay bare what is involved in religious existence, recover the situations which precede and correspond to theological formulations. We must recall the questions which religious doctrines are trying to answer, the antecedents of religious commitment. One more paragraph, ready? To some, the truth of religion is ritual. To others, the essence of religion is dogma. Ritual means what you do, right? My aunt used to come to the Pesach Seder, and my mother would say, Eddie's studying to be a rabbi. And she said, yeah, but he's not a real rabbi. He's a conservative rabbi. My rabbi is a real rabbi. He's orthodox. And then she looked at me and she said, are you Shomer Shabbos? I said, yeah, I think so. Not like my rabbi. He's a real Shomer Shabbos. What butcher shop do you buy from? I said, Ventura kosher. Ah, ganif, treif. So one Hanukkah, I made my aunt a gift. I did it. I got the kit from Heathkit, and I made her a thermometer. A thermometer means it has a probe, and you stick it into a Jew, and it tells you just how religious they are. It's a digital readout. And now my aunt can tell. That's ritual, right? Dogma is what do you believe in, right? Dogma is what do you believe in. Some people think the essence of faith is what you do. Some people think the essence of faith is what you believe. There is another component, however, which may be regarded as the vital ingredient, but because of its imponderable nature, it's hard to understand, it escapes the eye of the observer. It's that which goes on within the person, the innerness of religion. Vague and often indescribable, it is the heart of religious existence. Ritual and myth, deed and dogma remain external unless there's a response from within the person, a moment of identification and penetration to make them internals. All right, look, that's Hasidism, right? What is he saying? He's saying, unless you understand what's happening inside, take any species of religious expression, any text, any ritual, any symbol, and ask yourself, what happened to the person who created that 15 minutes before? What was he thinking? What was the experience that this form is trying to hold on to? Because if we hold on to the form, instead of getting to the heart of the experience, we have effectively killed religion. Look, let me give you an example. Let's take a form. Take some piece of religion, and let's take one. There's a book in the Bible called Psalms. You all heard of it? Psalms. It's 150 religious poems. The most famous one is 23. Chapter 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green. I studied that psalm in rabbinical school. We took Bible, whatever it was, 106. We learned all of the ancient Near Eastern roots of all those words. I can say that psalm in Ugaritic. I can order lunch in Ugaritic, right? Then we looked at the structure, the poetic structure of the psalm. Then we looked at how the psalm is used in liturgy. Then we looked at a bunch of the history of the psalm, the variant texts of the psalm and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint. And then one day, I was diagnosed with cancer. And I had to take my wife with me to the doctor. And we stood in the doctor's office, and he put a screen, a snapshot from my CAT scan up on this viewer. And he said, that white spot, that's cancer. I think we can get it out. And I said, you think you can get it out? He said, well, it's close to this thing and it's close to that thing, and I'm not sure we can get margins, but we're going to try and get it out for you. And then I understood what the psalm means when it says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And then my wife gripped my hand, and the doctor left the office, and she said to me, we will get through this together. We will get through this together. And then I understood the next line, which is, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'm not afraid because you are with me. Now I understand the psalm in a way that I never understood it in rabbinical school. Every species of religious experience, religious expression, is based on an experience. And we need to go past the expression, past the form, back to the experience. We have a custom in my shul. I don't know if you have it here. I hope not. Our custom, it was bequeathed to us by Satan. We allow bar mitzvah parents to speak to the kid on the bima. Do you do that here? Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. Because what happens is no matter how hard I work with these parents and tell them what to say and what not to say, they're going to say what they're going to say. You know, and there's the parent who literally says, the rabbi says I shouldn't talk about you as a soccer player, but you know, or I'm putting, here are the words that drive every rabbi, send a chill up a rabbi's spine. You know, I prepared something to say today, but I'd rather speak from my heart. Holy, oh.
Submit a 250-word piece a week and a half before the bar mitzvah. You're telling me they're not going to do that?
Well, they do it, but you see, my dear student, my dear Jedi, when you put a human being in front of a live microphone, no power on earth can keep them from saying something. So they look at the kid and they say, "You are the most wonderful child who's ever lived. My life revolves around you." You want to know why kids get into psychotherapy, right? Like you are, and so you listen. If you're sitting in the 5th or the 10th or the 20th row of the shul, you're just going, "Oh, sure, not again," Like the guy who gets up in this shul and he says, "Son, the synagogue is a second home to us." And I'm sitting next to my teacher, Harold Schulweiss, who's been in the shul for 50 years. And he said, "Who are these people? I've never seen them here before." And I say, "They must not get home an awful lot, And you look at it and you make fun of it. I make fun of it. And then it's your kid's bar mitzvah, or your niece's or nephew or your grandchild's bar mitzvah. And then you're the one up there going, "You're the most wonderful child in the world." It's a whole different thing if it's your experience, right? It's a whole different thing if it's your wedding, right? I used to work banquets, and if you're the waiter, it's a whole different experience than if you're the groom, right? Heschel is saying, look at the experience. Go back to the experience. What is lighting Shabbos candles all about? My mother was someone was talking about this. My mother's a Hashomer Tzer kibbutznik. She's an atheist communist who always professed not to believe. Except every Friday night, she put a shmata on her head, lit 4 Shabbos candles, and prayed. And I was a pain in the ass 15-year-old. I say, "Mama, you don't believe. Who are you praying to?" And she looked at me with that look, like, "Shut up." Like this is my moment of transcendence, right? Then I went to visit the kibbutz that they founded in Israel. It's a Shomer kibbutz, anti-religious kibbutz. And I'm standing there, and my kibbutz mother, Batya, puts a shmata over her head and lights the candles. And I said, "Batya," she says, "Shabbos." And as we walked from their apartment to the Chadar Ochel, to the dining room, every apartment has Shabbos candles. And there's all the mothers of the kibbutz with the shmata over their head. And I discover that there's a latent religiosity, even in anti-religious Jews. What's the experience? Don't pay attention to the form. Find the experience first, says Heschel. That's what we miss. But here's the problem. We do not have a word for the understanding of these moments. We don't have a language to describe this. How do we describe experiences? And he uses a word that's very, very important to him. The word is ineffable, which means inexpressible. So what he's going to do is create a vocabulary for us to understand so that we can recover these experiences and realize what it is religion is trying to say to us. Every species of religious expression is a freeze-dried form of experience. If you eat Taster's Choice right from the jar, it's awful. Trust me on this. If you put it in a glass with some hot water, you get a decent cup of coffee out of it, right? The point is we have to go and find the experiences. We have to ask the kid, what does it mean to chant this Haftorah? When I learned who Amos was, I learned him as an adult. I felt terrible that at 13 I didn't learn him because he would have been a brother to me because the way he saw the world was the way I saw the world. That's what we're supposed to be doing in religious education. You see? So what Heschel's going to do for us is he's going to try to help us understand what those experiences are. But here's the problem. You ready? You can't define those experiences. You can only point to them. It's like someone who asks you, what's it like to fall in love? You can talk for an hour about love. You can't give someone love. You can only point to it. You can lead them to it, but they have to jump into that experience. And it's only from the context of the experience, what he calls the situation, that you can really understand love or faith. And so here's the second thing you need to know about Heschel. And I'm going to give you a really good word. You can drop this in conversation today. You'll sound really smart. He is a phenomenologist, which means he's going to bracket out all sorts of skepticism philosophical skepticism, and he's basically going to say the following. There are many ways to know the world. And the many ways we use to know the world are associated with the repertoire of our experiences. If you want to know how to cure COVID, go to a biochemist or an immunologist, and they'll explain to you the structure of the virus and how we can keep the virus from infecting anybody else. But if you go to that biochemist or molecular biologist or immunologist and say, teach me about love, they're going to say, well, love's simple. Certain hormones start flowing through the body at certain moments, and certain proteins rise up and certain enzymes, and you say, what are you talking about, hormones and enzymes? I want to know about love. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. And you realize that he's the wrong guy to ask about love. You go to a poet to ask about love. You go to an artist to ask about love. Don't go to the poet to ask about how to cure the disease. It don't work. But go to the poet to find out about love. We have multiple experiences in our lives, and there are different ways of knowing. Ready? Religion is a way of knowing. It is a way of knowing a certain class of human experiences and drawing certain conclusions from those experiences. You cannot prove religion. That's like proving the truth of a love poem. It doesn't work. You're trying to use one way of knowing to demonstrate the validity of another way of knowing. It doesn't work. What you need to do is see the world through the eyes of that person. What would it be like to see the world through the eyes of a religious person, asks Heschel. This is how he taught. He used to have a little shtick when he gave lectures, wherever he was, colleges, universities, seminaries, churches, synagogues. He'd get up, a little teeny guy with long gray hair and in a European accent, and he'd whisper, he'd say, ladies and gentlemen, the sun just went down. A great miracle just happened. The sun just went down. And people look at him, miracle? Sun goes down? Why is that important? I thought you were going to teach us about religious philosophy. And then he would start to talk about how a religious person sees a sunset. And you began to realize that the fact that the sun went down and none of us rushed to the window to see it means that something's been lost in us. We've lost something in us. Heschel wants us to understand how that a religious person, this is part of his loneliness. His part of his loneliness, living as a religious man in a secular society, was to help us see the world as he sees it. So he's going to create a ladder of words that we thought we knew, but he's going to use them in a new way. Here's the first one. Wonder. And you got to read him slowly now, okay? Certain philosophers you can skim. Read quickly. Mordechai Kaplan, you can read as fast as you want because he only had one idea in his whole life, right? It's true. Heschel, you have to read very slowly, like poetry, right? It's like drinking good wine, right? Kaplan's like beer. You can like gulp it. But good wine, you have to like let it sit for a second. Ready? Wonder, which he translates as radical amazement, because of course regular amazement isn't good enough. Wonder or radical amazement is the chief characteristic of a religious person's attitude toward history and nature. Stop. Think. If I ask you, what's the chief characteristic of a religious person's attitude? You would say faith, belief, observance, identification, affiliation. Wonder? I went to the Jewish Theological Seminary for 7 years. You think they ever used the word wonder? The only time they say, I wonder if it snows enough. I have to go teach Hebrew school tonight. I wonder if he's going to put this question on the exam. Wonder is the chief characteristic of a religious person's attitude. How do you define wonder? Wonder is the oh wow experience. Look at that. Unbelievable. Who has wonder? Children. When I get depressed, which happens almost every day in my work, I go downstairs. We have a nursery school in our shuls downstairs from where my office is. I go downstairs and I visit my friends who are 3. They have wonder. Everything to them is new and amazing. The most wonderful thing in the world is this poor teacher has this beautiful lesson plan and a bug crawls in the room. It's the greatest thing in the world. And half the kids are screaming. They go, ew, a bug. But the kids are running and go, ooh, look at that. A bug. Far out. Look, let's touch it. Let's play with it. Let's eat it, And then snack time comes. You ever see 3-year-olds with snack? We give them an Oreo cookie and a little thimble of milk. You ever see a kid like that? Oh, it's the most wonderful thing in the world. The kid looks at it, studies it, considers it, and then he makes his decision. He separates the cookie, dips it in the milk, and smears it all over his mouth. And the kid is having such a beautiful, polymorphous, perverse experience. I'm looking at this. Are there any children here? Good. I say, once in my life, I want sex that good. Just once. I mean, the kid is so digging. And it's, I've eaten in very expensive restaurants. I've eaten very expensive food. This kid is getting off on a cookie and a little glass of milk in a way that no creme brulee ever got me happy. Right? Why? Because for a kid, it's all so amazing. Right? You ever give a kid a Hanukkah present? It's the coolest thing in the world. You go out and you spend all this money on a present, then you spend all this money wrapping it, and you bring it to the kid. What does he do? He unwraps it. He looks at the kid, the toy, plays with the toy for 5 minutes, and then what? The box. What could be more fun than a box? It's a house. It's a fort. It's an airplane. It's a car. Toys R Us now sells empty boxes. No, I'm not kidding. They sell boxes as gifts. You can get, here's the funniest thing, you ready? You can buy them on Amazon. They come in a box. And people do this. People buy them on Amazon and they send them in a box. Never mind. That's enough. One attitude is alien to his spirit. Taking things for granted. What's the opposite of religion? You'd say secularism, profane, atheism. No, says Heschel. That's important. The opposite of religion is boredom. The opposite of religion is to walk the world and find nothing interesting. Nothing that grabs your attention. Nothing that makes you say, ooh, look at that. That's the opposite of religion, right? To find an approximate cause of phenomena is no answer to his ultimate wonder. He knows that there are laws that regulate the course of natural processes. He's aware of the regularity and pattern of things. However, such knowledge fails to mitigate his perpetual surprise at the fact that there are facts at all. One of my very closest friends is a very, very high-powered research scientist. He's a medical scientist. He's going to win the Nobel Prize. We've even planned the trip to Stockholm already. He's going to win the Nobel Prize because he's going to cure Crohn's disease. And he is a person who is perpetually in wonder. Like he knows more science than anyone will ever know. He has 250, 300 scientific publications on his resume, and he's not done yet. And yet he walks around with this perpetual sense of, oh, wow. I mean, it's a pain in the ass to travel with him because he gets lost in train stations. I've had to go retrieve him. I mean, where's John? Where'd he go? He just found something interesting to look at. I mean, the guy just walks the world with this. He knows everything about everything, and yet nothing in the world doesn't escape it. Nothing escapes his attention and isn't more wonderful than it could possibly be. For Heschel, and this is what he said, and this is a line that I have on my desk, as civilization advances, the sense of wonder declines. That's a hell of a line, right? The more we think we know, the less we pay attention to. The more we think we know, the less surprised we are. The more we think we know, we stop at surface knowledge. We stop at concepts and names, and we don't look deeply into what the essence of a thing is. Such decline is an alarming symptom of our state of mind. Mankind will not perish for want of information, but only for want of appreciation. Stop a second. So here's the third thing about Heschel. If I'm going to describe to you powerful experiences, which you can only know from the inside, then the phenomenology means I can only point to it. But then I have to use a language which is both elusive and elusive. Elusive means it's a slippery language. It sounds more like poetry, because that's what poetry does. the reason poetry is poetry and not discursive language is because it's trying to describe things that you can't describe in discursive language, like love. And then it's elusive because it points to those experiences and leads us to a place where we can say, oh, now I see it. And then if you have the experience and a little sensitivity, you'll go back and read the poem again and you'll say, now I know what he's talking about. Though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I fear no evil because you're with me. And now I understand what that line means because now life has taught me what that line means. But the next thing Heschel is going to say is even more profound. Here's a man who lost everything, everybody he loved in the Holocaust. And the world he came from, that he cherished, was destroyed by the Nazis. And he lives with a dose of that wound in him, with the brutality of that moment in him. And then he comes to America as a refugee, and he notices that black people in the American South are treated with a degree of cruelty and brutality that suggests the experience that his family just had in Europe. And then in the middle of the 1960s, America goes to war in Vietnam. Some of you remember that. The pictures that came back suggest the same cruelty and brutality of the world that he came from. And again, Heschel meets that brutality in the world. And he begins to wonder, is there something in the structure of modern life that leads to that brutality? And he posits this idea that when we look at the world as subject and object, looking for information, we objectify the other. We objectify the world. We objectify the people we meet. We fail to see that we are bonded together. His epistemology, his philosophical move, is to try to get us to see differently. To see differently. Because deep down, it's not just a question of validating his religious perceptions. That's part of what he wants to do. Deep down, what he really wants us to understand is the way that we see the world determines the way we will behave toward the world. And therefore, if we still see other human beings as separate objects, then we don't have anything that stops us from destroying them. That we see the world in a certain way yields the kind of humanitarian crises that seem to keep happening in our history. And that's the way we treat the planet, and that's the way we treat each other. And so there is an ethical move here too. His religious philosophy leads directly to an ethical conclusion. He wrote his doctoral dissertation on the biblical prophets, and he makes the outrageous claim that the prophet sees the world through God's eyes and invites us to see the world through God's eyes. And if you see another human being through God's eyes, what you see is a creature of infinite preciousness, not an object to be used, an instrument to be employed, a resource to be exploited, but rather something of infinite preciousness. And so out of Heschel's religious philosophy comes his social activism. His best friend in the world was Martin Luther King. And he goes down to Selma. Now, you got to know JTS to know what a meshugana thing that was. Because JTS, my school, was a school that wouldn't play Hatikva at the graduation in 1948 because it was too political. JTS was a place that wouldn't talk about the word Vietnam, was never allowed to be spoken in that building. Civil rights, feminism, not spoken in that building because it had to be, if it wasn't about ancient Jewish texts, it wasn't to be spoken about in that building. And here's a man who leaves his professorship, goes down to be on the front line of a demonstration. And they thought he was nuts. They thought he was crazy. He's just crazy. Here's a guy who speaks out. He becomes chairman of the Clergy and Laity United Against the Vietnam War. Here's a guy who is speaking out about Jews trapped in the Soviet Union. Here's a guy who goes on Erev Rosh Hashanah to the Vatican to negotiate the changes in Vatican II, the Vatican doctrine about the Jews. And they screamed at him. He said, "You're an Orthodox Jew. What are you going, Erev Rosh Hashanah? Where are you?" And he says, think about how many Jews murdered because of that line in the liturgy. If I can save one, I could save the world. It's pikuach nefesh. And goes, there's a social activism here because what his philosophy is trying to help you do is to see the world differently. And in seeing it differently, you'll behave differently. Just before his death in 1972, he goes to Danbury Prison in the winter to greet Father Berrigan. Some of you remember who Father Daniel Berrigan was. He was an anti-war activist who was arrested by the FBI for defacing draft records of young men who were being drafted into the war. And Berrigan gets let out of prison, and Heschel goes up to, and his family said he had a heart condition. He was very sick. He said, "Don't go. It's freezing." And he says, "I do not want Daniel Berrigan to get out of prison and have to look into the eyes of the FBI. I want him to look into the eyes of someone who spends his days reading the biblical prophets." And he goes up to see Berrigan. This is a man whose religious philosophy overcomes him. And he becomes the activist that his philosophy demands of us. Because to see the world through the eyes of God, to feel the experiences that are at the heart of religious life, is to see the world in very different terms than we normally see the world. Some of you were here this morning. It's to give away the I-it and look at the world in terms of I-thou. And that will make you a lunatic in the world, but that's the only way to live in the world. That's the only way, Heschel says, that we can save this civilization. Because if we don't change the way that we behave, and if we don't change the way we see the world, then we will not survive as a species, right? We will not, civilization will decline, or mankind will not perish for want of information, only for want of appreciation. And that's his ultimate thesis. This is this crazy man. He died in the winter of 1972. When he died, no Jewish magazine did much about him, just held small articles. It was only the Jesuit magazine, America, that devoted a whole issue with him on the cover. It took 50 years before the Jewish world rediscovered him. 50 years where the Jewish world rediscovered him, and now he's the most influential Jewish philosopher in the world, even though he's been gone for 50 years. And that's what makes him remarkable. I commend him to you. If you'd like to read him, he's hard to read. So there's a couple of things I'm going to suggest you do. First of all, read him with somebody. Makes great love poetry, by the way. Read him with a friend. Start with the simplest book he wrote is called The Sabbath. It's an essay. It's not even a whole book, although they sell it as a book because Mr. Bezos needs. Start with The Sabbath and read it a little bit at a time. Just read it like we just did, a line at a time, a paragraph at a time, and read it with somebody, because you can. What did he just say? What does he mean by that? And then, if you get through The Sabbath, then take up his magnum opus, which is called God in Search of Man. Take God in Search of Man, which is a remarkable book, and read it a section at a time, very slowly, and listen to his poetry. And you have lots of questions, you can call Rabbi Adam, and he'd be glad to answer all your questions. And any question he can't answer, Rabbi Spitz can answer, Rabbi Fumber can answer, Rabbi Mendelsohn can answer, Rabbi Podwall can answer. And if they can't answer the questions, you can call me, okay? But it really is, it is a life-changing experience to read this book. It will really change the way that you think about faith and about Torah and about Judaism. As we say in our faith, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May the memory of a great tzaddik be a blessing to us all. Thank you. I'm not going anywhere because the game don't start for a few more hours. So if the rabbi will let us stay another minute, anybody have a question now they want to ask the rabbi? Any question at all about this or anything else? Yes, please. Yes. Hi. Okay. Right. You will be very happy with Heschel. Remember that Heschel lived in a time when the word spirituality was a pejorative. Mysticism, spirituality was equated with superstition, irrationality, pre-modern, primitive thought. The word spirituality did not become common until the 1990s. And now we think of it as a very powerful word. But when he was writing, it was considered a pejorative because the world was still taken up with this idea that science is everything. And he's coming to say science is not it. Science is an incredibly powerful tool for solving certain problems and knowing certain things. But it's not everything. And the application of science to the human heart is the wrong kind of knowing. So spirituality today is very, if you see his word religion, just translate it in your mind to spirituality, and it sounds very contemporary. You're welcome. Good. Yes, in the back, please. It looks like Ari, but I can't see. It is Ari. Okay. It's a, Adam, did they teach you Heschel? I taught you Heschel. Yeah. He's the most quoted Jewish philosopher, so I think he's studied in certain circles, but not many. The seminaries are still pretty scientific about how they. If you want to really learn Heschel, you got to go to Hebrew College and study with Art Green, who was his student, right? And that's a whole different kind of Judaism. So we can come and spend a week on Heschel together sometime if you'd like, right? Ari will take a trip and we'll go to Heschel land, okay? And he'll take us to some good places. It takes some real time to get into him and to read him. Today we just spent an hour with him. But this is just an introduction so you can now read him. Okay? Yes, please.
So I had the pleasure of studying with Rabbi Byron Sherwin.
Yeah, well, he's a great Heschel scholar, right.
Very great Heschel scholar. So
Yeah.
I was exposed to so much Heschel when I studied with him at Spertus Institute of Chicago.
Yeah.
And Byron Sherwin also has a series of fabulous books where he talks more about the teachings of Heschel. And one of the things he taught me was to call an experience an experience. To say, I'm having a God experience. I'm having a moment of religion. I'm having,
Yeah.
I'm in awe of watching the children or whatever it is. And by verbalizing that experience, that helps us internalize that experience.
Yeah, see, again, you get sensitive to a different vocabulary when you learn Heschel, for example. So in philosophy, we talk about concepts and ideas. And that's important, philosophical concepts and ideas, right? In science, it's discoveries. Heschel would say religion is about moments. Think about that, moments. So if I were to ask you not, do you believe in God? Well, but have you ever had a moment? Right? There's a very famous story from Larry Kushner, who was in Massachusetts and now is in San Francisco. So Rabbi Kushner tells a story in one of his books. He was teaching a post-bar mitzvah class, a bunch of teenagers, the good teenagers, the ones who came back after their bar mitzvahs, the really committed kids of the shul, of his temple. And he's sitting with these kids, and he asked the kids, do you believe in God? Class of 16-year-olds. And the kids look at him with great pity in their eyes, and they say, Rabbi, no one believes in God anymore. Come on, it's a silly idea. No one believes in God. He said, what do you mean no one believes in God? He said, no one believes in God. So the rabbi starts teaching them all the proofs for the existence of God, the cosmological proof and the teleological proof, and all of the proofs of the existence of God. At the end of the evening, the kids say, Rabbi, good try, great lesson today, but no one believes in God. So the poor rabbi goes home crestfallen, like he's failed, because these are the really great kids in the shul, the ones that came back to study with him. And then he comes back with a different question. The next week he asked the kids, when have you ever had a moment when you felt God was close? And wouldn't you know it, every single kid had an answer, right? One kid said, my mama lights candles on Friday night. I really think God is listening to her. Another kid said, my grandpa died. We went to the cemetery. We stood there and buried him. I really think God was there. Another kid said, I went to Israel and there were these immigrants, these refugees who came off another plane, and they got down on the ground and kissed the ground, and I felt that God was there. And another kid, every kid had an answer to that question. So the notion that while concepts and ideas are fine in a certain context for certain kinds of knowing, moments give us other kinds of knowing. And Heschel would say Jewish faith is not about the embrace of concepts. We make very bad theologians. Jewish faith is about memory and loyalty to those moments, right? You don't find statements of theological truth in the well, you do find one, I guess, in the Siddur. What you have is Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim. We remember the Exodus from Egypt. We had a moment at that moment, and we recreate that moment every morning and every night. We have these moments when we feel God is close. All of us have had those moments, right? I told you my mother's story. My mother, who was a non-believer, Friday night, God was real. I once probed her about that. I said, Mama, you really don't believe in God? She said, no, I'm just mad at him because he killed my family, she said, because so much of the family died in the concentration camps. She said, I'm still angry at him. But I say, you talk to him every Friday night. Yeah, I remind him I'm still here, she said to my mother's chutzpah, right? So, I mean, this notion of being sensitive to religious moments, you don't have to have the concept. See, the moment comes first, and then we create the concept as a container for the moment. The problem, as we saw from the very beginning, is that we hold on to the container and forget what the content, the stuff inside is. That's the problem. So we all have to go back to those moments again, and that's what Professor Sherwin tried to teach you so nicely. One more question, and then we're gonna. Adam wants to go take a nap. You got a bris? You look so Jewish. I didn't know. All right, I'll see you tonight. Would you do me a favor and text me where I'm going tonight? I'd like to know if it's okay. I'm supposed to go someplace and talk to somebody, but I don't know where and when and who. But otherwise, yeah, please.
So I want to go back to what you started with, your 2-week trip to Orange County.
Yeah.
And you turned off the radio because they mentioned the name of...
I didn't say, don't say who they mentioned. It's just someone who was once in government.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I didn't know they're still talking about the guy from 6 years ago.
They're talking about all sorts of people.
Right.
So anyway, I worry, like so many of us, whatever political stripe you come from, you have to be concerned about the nature of this society right now, about its divisiveness, its polarization, the kind of qualities of rage that you find on all sides of our politics, and our seemingly inability to have a civil conversation about anything without screaming. Right? I mean, I don't know whose Seder table or Thanksgiving table you're going to be sitting at, but we have to set up rules in the family about what you can and can't talk about over the turkey, and that's distressing because I think democracy is as Aristotle taught us, is a civil conversation about our collective future, and I think people of goodwill can sit and talk about different visions of our collective future without hurting each other. And unfortunately, we seem to have left that behind. And I'm not blaming, because I know people on the left and people on the right who are guilty of this. I'm just hope and pray that this last election, because it was so very close, might indicate to us that there is actually a well of folks in the middle of this culture who are looking for moderate, wise government and civil conversation and a return to a civil democracy. I have friends who are Republicans and friends who are Democrats, friends who are socialists and friends who are, not, very right-wing kinds of friends and real nationalists. And I can have civil conversations with them. And I hope that the country finds that again. Otherwise I worry deeply for democracy is an experiment, and we have to keep doing it. They once asked Ho Chi Minh what he thinks of democracy, and he said, well, when did it start? And they said, French Revolution was 1789, and he said, well, it's too soon to tell. It takes a while. We have to get good at this, and we're in a moment where where it's been challenged, and we have to look very carefully at what our deepest values are. So, to be honest with you, that's the reason I turn off the radio, because I'm not sure that it helps. I really want to find that. I want to find that civil middle of American democracy again. So that's and I'm not going to say any more, because the next thing I say will get me in trouble, and I don't want it to get me in trouble. So whatever your feelings are, I hope I have offended you equally. But thank you for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone. Stay well.
Rabbi, thank you so much. On behalf of CBI, it was really nice to have you here. And I know I learned a lot and look forward to re-listening to these things. Thank you, everyone, for coming.